It's a bit of a creepy session. It's Friday the 13th and it's nearly Halloween. So we've got a few a little scary stuff about Google Analytics. So with me today is George from Measurelab. Welcome, George.
Hi, Edward.
So tell us a bit about what you do with. And I know for your sins you have to speak about GA4 as a day job as well as on this session.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a lead analytics consultant at Measurelab. Essentially, Measurelab exists to kind of help clients get the most out of their data. For the past 3 years, it's involved a lot of GA4 migration work, but sort of now very much helping clients get the most out of GA4. And it's kind of all set up and running.
So I guess you've seen a lot of weirdness, and I know both you and I spend a lot of our time deep in the weeds of this. So perhaps to most of the people listening to this, Google Analytics is just a pretty scary product anyway. But I think what we want to do is to highlight some of the things that might feel spooky, but some of them there are good solutions to. Some of them are just hard to work with. But let's bear it warts and all. So yeah, let's start. I think you want to start with the horrors of auto migration. Tell us.
Yeah, so I've got an analogy that universal analytics is essentially was the message raw of the house. So sort of you can go in there, you can rummage around, find what you need, but sort of over time, more and more things just kind of get added to this message raw and get added to universal analytics. What happened with sort of GA4, Google ever being being as helpful as ever, decided that they would help everyone auto migrate to GA4, which then kind of carried over this message raw into something that otherwise could have been quite neat, quite tidy, and sort of we saw it as more of an opportunity to kind of clean up, whereas Google has kind of helped bring over a lot of the dirt and the rubbish.
Yes, and I mean, I think it's well-meaning, wasn't it? It was trying, everyone was saying, hey, my pain is, at the time, it's going back a year, like, my pain is trying to get all the stuff I had in Universal Analytics into GA4. So they sort of wanted to do the right thing, but ended up creating layers and layers of confusion. And the irony, I mean, obviously what we told all of, our customers a little later that basically don't do auto migration. But the problem is that Google then made it super hard to actually stop auto migration. So just to show,
you had to jump back into like the old property just to do it.
Yeah. So basically, if you saw something like this with this sort of banner saying complete the setup, and then perhaps you still have it on there. There's no dismiss option. So basically, the only way you can actually do it is go back into the Universal Analytics store, go to the GA4 setup systems, and then click to disconnect. And then you'll be free of it. So that's the fix if you're still haunted by auto migration.
I think also that like from my perspective, one of the worst bits is that like it auto migrated all of the audience configurations as well. So all the sort of legacy audiences that are in UA get auto migrated, auto set up, and people just kind of carry on with status quo, whereas actually there's so many other new exciting features within the audiences that then are left untouched, and people kind of don't want to explore because they've kind of got what they used to have. It's just a real shame. Like it just ends up being underutilized, really.
The audiences is one of those features of GA4 that was just fundamentally rebuilt and better, and it is now a really powerful feature. So I agree. And look, I think also that the root problem, and we'll come to this a few of the other points, is that it's just a completely new product, and so trying to just migrate everything and keep it as before actually created a worse problem, which is that then it wasn't quite as it was before. I think in a lot of cases people would be better just saying, okay, blank canvas, let's just start with what we need now.
Exactly that, 100%.
Cool. Which brings us on to attribution. Now, as I think people have been in the industry a while, we know that this is like a dirty word for a lot of analysts. I mean, there's never such thing as 100% correct attribution, but I think it's fair to say that there's some quite often the root of it is quite simple, though.
Yeah, I mean, like I think most people are probably familiar with like UTMs and UTM tracking. It's just most people also forget to use them. So So, you know, it'll quite often happen, oh, how did this like campaign perform? Or like, you know, how many conversions did we get from this email that we just sent? And so if you start digging around and it just ends up being actually no campaign tagging was included, and so we can't actually see that result. Like the sort of best guess you can do is when you're looking at sort of like a week or like month-on-month increase, and then you can sort of assume in a way, or like finger in the air, so say, okay, that's been from that campaign, that email. But yeah, I mean, lack of UTMs is always a scary thing, especially when you're trying to report on the success of certain campaigns.
Or lack of consistent UTMs. I mean, I was on a call with a customer last week, and they were complaining about, you know, not being able to see the traffic in Klaviyo, the email traffic they'd sent. And we dug in again. We have a standard article about how to tag email campaigns, because in Klaviyo, annoyingly, the default is not source is not email, or sorry, medium is not email. So if medium's not email, then when you go to the channel grouping, it just all goes into unassigned, because Google doesn't recognize Klaviyo flow as a medium. It thinks that's you know, that's unknown. So sometimes just simply following the kind of patterns that Google's laid down in the default channel grouping and following the rules means that it will just automatically fall into the right buckets rather than being in a sort of unassigned bucket.
Yeah, I mean, people can get really creative with the names, even when you do follow the rules. So, you know, tag everything, got everything reported on by source, medium, campaign. The conversion attribution actually changes, or is rather like refreshed every 7 days. So within a 7-day period of sort of a session happening, yes, you can report on it, but just expect potentially those conversions to actually be reassigned. So there's been some cases, you know, we go in and we can see in a client's property, okay, there's been 30K assigned to PPC, and some extreme scenarios, they go back a week later and actually a lot of that has been reassigned to organic. It's just been that sort of headache that we've also had to juggle with.
Yeah. So I guess the lesson there is perhaps not to jump to early conclusions about. I mean, I'm a booster for the data-driven model generally, because I think it is fair, but obviously it takes a little while. You've got to sort of see the customer journey over a certain period to be able to correctly assign. Or it takes some time for the algorithm to learn. So I guess, you know, maybe just not trying to analyze campaigns on the same day and giving it a week of breathing space.
Yeah, I mean, people's viewpoint change. Like I can see the value of data-driven campaigns, but I think, you know, last click itself is like very, very powerful. At least when a lot of the campaigns run are sort of at that bottom of the funnel stage, and so waiting a week sometimes isn't actually viable for them to optimize those campaigns, and you're losing and spending like a lot of money that otherwise you didn't need to. So I think that there needs to be a balance, and whether that be, you know, in the extreme case, let's take data out of GA4 into BigQuery. You can build like a attribution model so you can get like live reporting in there. That's one option. Otherwise, sort of you've got to find a balance using the UI and sort of, yeah, holding off making too many campaign changes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, our guest last week, or so a week before, Tom was actually showing how you can kind of explore the data-driven attribution by sort of segmenting for a given order by channel or by campaign. But the actual number of cases where in his test, or you know, his example where there were more than, you know, where an order was split by more than one channel was actually quite limited. So, you know, I suspect that for a lot of brands, last click is going to be, you know, pretty similar. But anyway, you're right. I mean, I guess the gotcha there is that the attribution can change in data-driven model and may do up to 7 days after the click. Okay, well, that's creepy, but not as creepy as the next topic, which is reporting identity. Again, we covered this extensively in July, but tell us more about the challenges of using reporting or stitching together different users in Google Analytics.
Yeah, so I guess from an outside perspective, it sounds like a dream, right? So Google have developed this like tiered system of analyzing users. So it's got a user ID, then it can also use Google Signals, and then you've got device ID. So Google Signals being you're sort of browsing on a device in a window, and you've kind of consented to actually share your user profile information with Google so that they can stitch you across devices, cross sessions. So theoretically, sounds like a dream. And sort of the last I checked, the way it's sort of communicated is you can use all three in conjunction with one another. However, the reality is completely different. So up until recently, Google Signals, if you're using that in the reporting identity, applies thresholding in your reports, which essentially means it will treat the user's metric as a piece of demographic information. So if you start getting sort of like too specific to a user, then it will kind of omit that data from your report, which is obviously not what we want for any kind of analysis. We want as much data as possible. You can now toggle that on and off. So I sort of suggest toggling it off and not using it in the reporting identity.
So if you don't know what you're talking about, it's here in the settings. There's a tab down here for reporting identity, and as you're saying, that there's the blended method, which is the default. Theoretically, it's fine. They're basically saying use the best of user ID, Google Signals, device ID, and model. But in practice, apart from the thresholding, it just seems to actually produce worse outcomes for attribution than just device-based, which is basically effectively what you had with universal analytics. So device ID being effectively the cookie ID that you've collected for that user.
Yeah, I mean, even using user ID. So we always kind of look to implement a user ID so that then later we can stitch that user ID with sort of other offline data in BigQuery. But I mean, even using a user ID, the way the stitching works is, so if we have, 10 events in a session, and a user logs in on event number 5, then those first 5 events are all associated to the user with the user ID. Say they log out on event number 8, event number 9 and 10 are then treated as events associated to a new user. So then this technically one user that's had 10 events is tracked in GA4 as 2 users, one with 8 and one with 2. So yeah, I mean, even user ID has an issue, but I'm going to keep coming back to it. But once again, Google BigQuery can be used to kind of go around that, or you kind of revert back to a device-based reporting, which is sort of, I don't know, I'm uneasy with, simply because that was one of the benefits of moving to Google Analytics 4 is that you get this stitching.
Theoretical benefits, but as I said, I think when we went through it with sort of 10 different big customer accounts we're working with, and I think only in one did blended actually show any sort of better. I mean, we were judging it by basically what percent of traffic is, what percent of revenue is attributed to direct or unassigned. And in most cases, device ID seems to do better in terms of more visible attribution. So, and as you say, it's the annoying thing is that to switch it off again, there's a gotcha, which is that it's not actually it's a hidden option. Effectively, you have to go in and you have to basically. Hang on, just share the screen again. So annoyingly, Google hides it down here. So it's not there. You have to click Show All, and then you can select device space. So I think a lot of people probably don't know that's even an option.
Yeah. That said, though, like the blended data model can be actually really useful if you've got the likes of sort of Google consent mode set up. So it almost brings us onto the next scale, which is around cookie banners and sort of whether they're working, whether you've got them plugged in correctly. So in an ideal world, someone comes to your site, get presented with a cookie banner, they accept or reject, and it will either fire the sort of tags you want or not. So you're either tracking someone or you're not. With the element of Google consent mode, what you can actually do is when someone rejects those cookies, you can still track them just without actually deploying a cookie, which means from sort of purely analytics perspective, we still get the data, just not the person, is the best way to think about it. And that model data is actually really interesting because then you can model that sort of behavior of unconsented users or users that rejected cookies back into your data. So you kind of get a more accurate picture of revenue. So rather than sort of always having a discrepancy to certain systems, instead you kind of got this more complete round picture of actually GA, and rather than sort of having this, there's GA is always 10% out because of cookies, kind of brings you closer to that picture of actually no, it's pretty complete.
Yeah, I think the annoying thing is there's no option in reporting identities to just have model data under it. You basically got to have Google signals, which is the one that basically applies the thresholding.
You can turn that off now. So it's quite a recent feature, but you can turn that off now. So then it can use user ID, it can use model data, it could use device ID. Or if you're not providing user ID, it would just use device ID and model data.
Got it. Yeah, so that might be the best. Still a bit of a minefield when it comes to options. So yeah, let's talk about more about key banners. So I mean, yes, consent mode is good, but I mean the key problem is that a lot of people don't actually have the banner actually wired in effectively, and so in a way, well, there's two problems. On the one hand, you have a cookie banner, but it literally does nothing. Whether user clicks OK or no thanks or change preferences, it just tracks them anyway. I mean, this is a particular problem we see on Shopify stores because, in fact, you have to go into the back end to enable that customer privacy, consent, data to be collected after consent. By default, data is just collected anyway. But then obviously the other problem is that the landing page is typically the thing that, going back to your UTM parameters, that's the thing that has all the information about where the customers come from, what campaign, which ads. And if you don't capture those URLs in the landing page, then you basically lose the session. And so what we see a lot is that people click OK on the banner, but the landing page is not tracked, not until the next page they get tracked, and then the UTM parameters have been lost.
Yeah, it's certainly a real headache. And I partly for this reason, but also fun because it's the type of people we are at Measurelab, we ended up building our own sort of tag manager template to implement Civic with consent mode, and sort of gets around all these problems you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, the number of times sort of you start an audit of a site and the first thing you check is, okay, is this cookie banner actually working? And 9 times out of 10 it isn't. I've seen examples where people are actually tracking interactions on a cookie banner, which almost makes it worse. You can go, oh yeah, well I can see that 50 people have rejected it based on Google Analytics. I was like, well, that's a problem right there.
Yeah. That's not allowed. I mean, I think with Shopify, there's luckily quite a simple solutions which the latest supports, which is that Shopify has if the cookie banner is compatible, it has what's called its customer privacy API. So basically, whether you click OK or no thanks on the cookie, then gets sent into the Shopify JavaScript on the front end, and then you're compatible and provide its compatible apps. And then obviously we pick that up. So as soon as there's no sort of further integration needed, as soon as they click OK, we get a ping back, our tracking structure ping back, and they get tracked. Similar for no thanks, and similar for if you do kind of opt out of analytics but not marketing cookies or vice versa. So there's a good there's a way to do it right, but unfortunately it's a minefield. I feel I've used that minefield word twice now, so I won't use it again. Right, so that leads us on to the final topic, which is probably the most annoying one for a lot of big brands, which is cardinality. Tell us more.
Yeah, so cardinality is essentially the number of unique values in a data set. So if you're looking at sort of like a dimension level, something like device category, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, sort of has 3/4 values. So you've got mobile, desktop, tablet, and then you've also got smart TV. When you kind of go into the UI, if you've got dimensions with high cardinality, so this is like 500 unique values in a single day, then what can happen is Google will aggregate that data into a rather unhelpful other row. So you might go into like your sort of site content report, and sort of all you're getting is maybe top 10, top 20 pages, and then just like one of them would be other. But because of the volume of data aggregated into that other row, it might be appearing as like number 1 or 2. So there are things you can do, like you can I think request like expanded data sets to try and reduce that, but I think that can take up to like sort of 48 hours to actually come back into the property.
But how do you do that?
It should be something you can request. So in a report, if you kind of get a warning of cardinality, then you should be able to request the expanded data set.
Okay, but it takes a while from Google's end to process that.
Yeah, exactly. Because what they're doing is almost the underlying data set that sort of is not visible, but is what kind of feeds into the UI, is essentially being reprocessed based on, okay, let's not aggregate, let's expand this. They're essentially removing like a row limit, and then you can request that.
Yeah, I was trying to run an account with cardinality that I could share, but I can't at the moment. But yeah, I think I see the point. So this is particularly affects, I mean, as you say, actually, so device types are low cardinality, that's definitely not going to be affected. But
the expanded data set might be a 360 only feature. I have a feeling it might.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's certainly something I'm not aware of, and I think I remember reading that in the docs. So basically, so what are your options? You want to get rid of cardinality? Well, let's say we have our landing pages and we've got more than 500 a day. So probably on my monthly report I've got more than a couple of thousand, and I start seeing other in brackets at the end. What are my options to see more?
If you're paying for 360, you can use the expanded data set.
Yep.
Otherwise, BigQuery is a good tool to kind of get around that. So BigQuery, first of all, one key thing from UA to GA4, the BigQuery export is free.
Yeah.
So sort of strongly encourage anyone who's setting up a GA4 property also set up BigQuery export.
It's free to stream the data in. I mean, obviously, BigQuery itself is not free, but it's to store data. It's very low cost, I think we should say.
Yeah, I'll sort of say that within the first 6 months of sort of having that data streaming in, if you found a use case for it, great. You've got it. You can carry on using it. If not, at max, you've spent sort of £10 in those 6 months. Exactly. 9 times out of 10. Yeah. Because the storage cost is just that cheap. And in there, it's the raw data export. So you don't necessarily need to worry, or you don't need to worry about cardinality at all.
Yeah.
You can.
So you're never going to see other
query.
You're always going to see the actual, even if it's only had one hit, you're going to see that actual item. And I think you're saying actually this could affect e-commerce merchant, with sort of high numbers of SKUs, potentially, as you say, either purchasing or just some of the view list item or view item events. And yeah, I mean, I guess say 500 different unique values a day is reasonably easy to hit for a high SKU store. So
yeah, I mean, like what you might want to look at is not only, okay, yeah, you can use your sales data to see, okay, what are the items that might be low performing, we're not getting very many sales on, but you want to cross compare that with, actually, let's look at GA4 and see what are the pages that people have visited, like what are the products people are viewing but not buying, to get that conversion rate. And if all of that data is in an other row, it's just not helpful. Best of both worlds would be, having a data set that then combines that GA4 data with your sales system, and then you can visualize that in sort of whatever tool.
So I guess now we talk about it, is that so potentially cutting down the time range of the report might also though reduce the likelihood of other, because you say it's basically as a sort of daily basis that it's looking for that.
Yeah. There are certainly things you can do to reduce it. So I mean, if getting like cardinality, and quite common one is like page location. So it's just like the URLs, stripping out things like query parameters that you just don't need, or like, you want to leave in your search ones, anything to do with attribution. So your UTMs, your G-clids, your Facebook click IDs, but
Luckily, Apple will filter those out for you these days.
Yeah. I mean, that very, very kind of them. They obviously know the issue that we're facing, and so they do it for us. But yeah, there are things that can be done. It's just all kind of like tiptoeing around a bigger issue.
Yeah, because I think in I don't think they're really extended in universal analytics. You could obviously add filters to do this kind of stuff pre-processing, like strip out things like URL params, but I don't think you can really do that in GA4.
Where we've done it is kind of has been done within Google Tag Manager. But I mean, to be honest, like if you're getting that to that point, then basically what you're doing is you've lost your leg and you're trying to put on a plaster on it. Like just find a better solution, and sort of the better, more long-term solution is using rather than using the UI to report, just use BigQuery and actually build a dashboard in there instead.
And also, one of the things we pushed before is, BigQuery into Looker Studio is quite a simple and painless solution. Like Google's made it very well optimized, both in terms of the query speed, but also the kind of UI to basically, because it knows the standard data schema in BigQuery, you don't have to do a lot of processing. You just go and as we talked about earlier, and on the first thing about attribution, the other value there is that it's not going to be, it's not going to wobble, it's not going to change over that 7 days. So you kind of know that, because one of the common things we hear from customers is this whole like daily reporting thing. They want to get a report on their desk kind of like 8 a.m. of like the performance of the previous day, and because GA4 doesn't, unless you're on 360, doesn't process, within, well, certainly not within sort of 8 hours, but sometimes not within 24. Basically, from midnight, you just can't get it there for the next morning. So the solution to that is also BigQuery, because BigQuery there's no processing delay. It streams in a few minutes. So a report there can be real time-ish.
Yeah, I mean, if you got there's 2 exports from BigQuery. You got like the daily export, the streaming export. That streaming export comes within minutes of an event being logged.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've built quite a few like real-time reports essentially.
Yeah.
All sort of similar thing you said in terms of like, okay, let me just show a 24-hour tracker of like purchases and revenue. Is another thing you can kind of use that stream and export for as well.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's about all we have time for. Thank you very much. Those are all quite creepy things, but equally, I think maybe when you know your way around, you won't get so spooked. They are, I think on the whole, I'm still a big booster for Google Analytics 4 because I think it has huge power as a tool, and frankly, it's as a free tool, it trounces quite a lot of the paid tools out there. So yes, there's a few quirks. Yes, it's very different to Universal, and I think lots of people struggle with that. I'm still a big believer that, if we fast forward a year, there'll be a lot of people out there who are going, oh yeah, no, like this is now what we use. This is the standard thing. Well, thanks for coming on the live stream, George, and I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. All right. Thanks, Edward.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.